To several recent instances of campaign trail controversy. They all involve Democratic candidates taking issue, or so it seems, with their opponent's military service. Trace Gallagher live in our West Coast newsroom with more. Trace?
And Megan, the reason the veterans groups are angry is because the candidates who are criticizing their opponent's military service never served in the military themselves. The most glaring comment came from Arkansas Democratic Senator Mark Pryor saying this about his Republican opponent, Congressman Tom Cotton. Watch.
I think that's part of this sense of entitlement that he gives off, is that it's like, I serve my country, therefore let me to the Senate. That's not how it works in Arkansas.
But Cotton believes serving his country enhances his credentials and is now countering Pryor's statement by using his former drill instructor in an ad. Watch this.
Drill Sergeant Norton taught me how to be a soldier. Accountability, humility, and putting the unit before yourself. That training stuck.
It better have.
In Alaska, a group backing Democratic Senator Mark Begich ran an ad accusing Republican Dan Sullivan of not being a real Alaskan. Listen.
Documents show that while Sullivan pocketed a Maryland tax credit for residents living there, he was voting in Alaska, claiming to be one of us.
What the ad left out is that Sullivan lived in Maryland to work in national security after 9/11. He was also a Marine called to active duty 3 times, including as late as last year. The National Republican Senatorial Committee was not about to let that comment pass, so they made an ad using a comment from a local Alaska news anchor. Watch this.
Sullivan and his family moved to Alaska in '97. In 2004, he was recalled to active military duty. Really? You're going to begrudge the guy for that? I don't think so.
Finally, in the Maryland governor's race, the Democratic Attorney General went after his opponent, saying that serving as a lawyer in the Iraq War was not a real job. Megan.
Trace, thank you. Joining me now with more, Pete Hegseth, who's an Iraq and Afghanistan combat veteran and CEO of Concerned Veterans for America, as well as a Fox News contributor. Pete, it's like... What did you do? As I was here pushing paper, you were out risking your life in Iraq and Afghanistan. That's not a real job.
It couldn't be a real job. And certainly I feel entitled to be on the Kelly file because I served in Iraq. You remember when they made a big deal on certain other networks about how the Republican National Committee was doing training for Republican candidates about how to talk about women's issues? I would suggest, one might suggest, the Democrat Party might want to think about how training their candidates on how to talk about veterans issues. And even sitting members of Congress, these are U.S. senators, and Mark Begich and Mark Pryor, who have the audacity to walk out and say, you left this state to go serve your country after 9/11, that's not good enough, you're not a real Alaskan. Or you went and became an Army Ranger and served in Iraq and Afghanistan, putting yourself in harm's way, and that somehow entitles you. It's such a detachment. And both of those gentlemen, by the way, come from families where their father, in Mark Pryor, was a U.S. senator, and in Alaska, his father was a U.S. representative. So they're coming from long lines of political families and disparaging folks who put on the uniform to serve this country at a dangerous time. It's amazing.
Do you think it belies an underlying bias among some, in particular, in this case, it's Democrats, but against military service, that there's a certain kind of guy who goes into the military, and my opponent is that kind of guy?
Well, you remember the John Kerry comment.
Which we have, actually. Let's play it from 2006.
If you make the most of it, you study hard, and you do your homework, and you make an effort to be smart, you can do well. If you don't, you get stuck in Iraq.
But that is more telling than people think. I think the left has a veterans problem in some ways because there is this underlying sentiment of the military's the place where the kid down the street, a blue-collar family goes to serve their country, maybe get a leg up. But anybody who would run for office, of course, they're in the ivory towers of Harvard and getting those refinements that one would need in order to be a U.S. senator. My goodness, if we had a few more people who know how to put their, really put their life on the line and serve this nation for something greater than just a resume, we might actually get things done. There's only 2 combat veterans in the Senate, Megan.
Is that
2
right?
serving combat veterans in the U.S. Senate. Maybe if we had a few more folks like that, we might actually get some things done.
At least John Kerry served.
Yeah, exactly.
These other guys did not serve. They don't put on the uniform. quick to diminish those who do. I mean, just as a political matter, the stupidity of that is readily apparent.
These are public statements. It's readily apparent, and they don't even realize it, and then they rarely walk back from it. They sort of stick to their guns and say, well, I kind of misspoke. But generally speaking, they're just not qualified. Dismissive of what a colonel. This guy in Maryland is a colonel. Sullivan's a lieutenant colonel. Cotton's a captain. You guys have led men,
but
done incredible things.
the guy in Maryland, you know, he was a lawyer. Like they rip on so Gansler was ripping on his opponent, Maryland Lieutenant Governor Anthony Brown, and he's basically saying, look, he was a lawyer in Iraq. That's all fine and good, but this is a real job. Maybe he's ripping on lawyers and not so much the fact that he served in Iraq.
He has no idea what he's talking about, and it's because there's detachment. Only a quarter of the U.S. Senate has served. Like I said, only 2 have seen combat. These are folks who just don't get it. It's a detachment from this institution that's went and fought our wars for the last decade, and other people have stepped aside. They don't understand it. They don't know how to talk about it, and frankly, they thumb their nose down at it and say, you do my dirty work while I pontificate in the Senate. It's BS.